cops, what is the most stupid criminal you have ever met? A little over a month ago, my apartment was broken into whilst my boyfriend was still inside. He works nights, so at midday, he's still fast asleep and didn't notice this guy come in and rummage around until he throws the bedroom door open, panics at seeing my BF, and runs off. My BF looks around the apartment and finds that the laptops, tablets, and all are still there, and he must have run off before getting to all that, but a handful of smaller valuables such as USBs, keys, wallets were gone. He also did a fair amount of damage rummaging around and spray painting our walls, also ate our biscuits. What was there, however, were the idiot's bags. He'd left his school rucksack containing some schoolwork, some of our possessions, his ID, some years old school papers with his parents' phone numbers on it, etc. So already, he's an idiot, we know who he is, the police are having a laugh with us a little later about it, and as one of them takes my BF statement, we hear a knock at the door. I went to answer it as a friend said he was coming over anyway, and I found the same guy from the ID outside my door. He looks at me, then at the police officer behind me, still holding the bags, and asks, "Can I have my bags back, please?" After a stunned moment, he's grabbed by the police officer and my BF confirms that this is the guy. He's arrested on the spot. The police said it was the dumbest thing they'd ever seen, like something out of a sitcom and made local news. Well, I can see why he has to steal. Story 2. So I get a call of a beer run shoplifting from the local CVS. I check the area and see 2 guys matching the description. I detain them, and sure enough, they had a couple of Coronas and some off-brand whiskey. I confirm with CVS they were the suspects, the alcohol was their property, and they are desirous of prosecution. All is good. My state requires I take them to the station to book into jail and get fingerprinted. Then they are issued a citation and released with a court date a couple months out. While driving to the station, I asked what they were doing stealing the alcohol. One guy says that they are only 20, and since they weren't old enough to buy it, they just decided to steal it instead. No big deal, young people make stupid mistakes. I get to the jail, book them in, and start filling out the citation. The citation requires both birth date and age. I do the math on the birthday, and sure enough, the guy is 21, meaning he is old enough to buy alcohol. So I go back into the jail and verify his birthday. Yup, the same one he had listed on his driver's license. I redo the math out loud, 21 years old. I ask, "How old are you again?" He replies, 20, sir. I said, "You turned 21 last month." Again, he is adamant, "No, I turned 20. I just left it at that. Story 3. Not a cop, but I used to work at a smoke shop. 3 guys broke in through a large window, leaving red liquids everywhere, just trying to get in. Walked right past the high-end, fancy, expensive glass and proceeded to grab as many cheap Chinese glass paraphernalia as possible. They went back through the window, breaking 2 or 3 glass paraphernalia in the process of crawling through the tiny hole they made, probably cutting themselves even more than they already have, and hightailed it across the street. They seemed to have dropped damn near everything while running because there was literally a trail of broken glass leading to the apartment across the street. Cops came, followed the glass trail leading directly to someone's door, looked over the little fence to their bottom floor balcony and saw 3 guys all cut up smoking from a broken glass paraphernalia. We estimated they took 8 or 9 glass paraphernalia. They were smoking from the only survivor. They turned out to be regulars, never seen them again after that. Story 4. There was a kid who sold substances on my floor of the college dorm who wasn't the brightest. One night he was driving back to the dorm and a police car came behind him and turned on their lights. The idiot stored all of his substances in his car and assumed they were pulling him over for possession. He proceeds to drive through a red light and pull into the dorm parking lot to hide. Now, mind you, his car was covered in bumper stickers, had a kayak rack and a vanity plate to top it all off. The parking lot only had one entrance and exit 2. Apparently, he thought the police car wouldn't go through a red light to follow him. Long story short, they were just going to warn him for having a taillight out and nothing more. Instead, he ended up in the local jail and expelled from the college. The funniest part is that his ledger of all transactions and the dollar amounts, products, and buyers were also right there in his car. He was one stupid criminal. Story 5. Not a cop myself, but about 10 years ago I got held up and robbed by a group of 3 guys with knives. All they wanted was the money in my wallet, so me, being the smart guy not wanting to mess with knives, just obliged. At the end of the ordeal, he put the knife to my throat and said, "If you ever tell the cops my name is redacted, I will end you right now." So I went home, called the cops, told them where it happened, and gave them the name the guy told me. The name instantly rang a bell with them since the guy had come into contact with the police in the past. Cops went to the spot where I was robbed and they were laying in an ambush for a new guy to appear. They could instantly identify the guy, he was arrested, and that's about it. Happened in the Netherlands, don't know his sentence or anything. Story 6. Took a vehicle burglary report where the victim found a driver's license sitting on her driver's seat that the suspect must have left behind. Seems damning, but if he had any criminal smarts, he would just say his license was stolen and the thief must have dropped it while breaking into this new victim's vehicle. Without any other evidence, the case would have gone nowhere. The next day, I took a report at a church that was a couple of blocks away from the vehicle burglary. This guy stole the video cameras from the building. He must have thought the footage came with a camera, because when we checked the video, there was a high-def close-up of the suspect's face as he removed the camera. Good evidence, sure, but I still didn't know who the guy was until I looked at the license I collected the day prior and saw it was the same exact guy. Story 7. My father is a police officer. He once told me a story about a call he responded to regarding reports of a man and a woman fighting in an apartment. The call came from neighbors who were concerned about the noise. He worked the third shift, so this was very late at night when all the crazy people are all up and at him. When he arrived, he could hear the yelling through the door. He knocked and announced that it was the police. There was immediate silence, and then a man answered the door completely disrobed. The man didn't give my dad a chance to speak or ask questions. The first thing he said was, "I don't have a knife behind my back." Well, he definitely did have a knife behind his back. Furthermore, the woman he was with had substances, which is what they had been fighting over. They both got arrested that night. Tip: don't do illegal substances, and if you do, don't answer the door for the cops. Story 8. I'm not a cop, but I worked at a 7-Eleven in a rough part of Chicago. Two guys came in and asked for 2 bottles of Grey Goose. I asked them for their IDs, they handed them over, and I grabbed the bottles from behind the counter to ring them up. Suddenly, they grabbed the bottles and booked it out of there, leaving their IDs sitting right on the counter. I called the police, and when they arrived asking for a description of the thieves, I simply handed them the IDs. The cops were in disbelief about the stupidity. They left and went to the address on one of the IDs, which was only about 2 blocks away. About 15 minutes later, they walked back in with the 2 guys and the bottles of Grey Goose. The poor guys didn't even have a chance to open them. I confirmed it was them, decided not to press charges, took the bottles back, and went on with my overnight shift. Story 9. Not me, but my buddy is a cop and told me about this one kid in particular he dealt with for years. There was no cleverness to him. Numerous times he walked into his neighbor's garage in broad daylight and just stole his bike. He constantly stole from stores in plain view and even committed the occasional minor crime or burglary. He always got caught. In fact, he had never gotten away with any of his hundreds of crimes. But because he was a minor, there were never any real repercussions. A few days before he turned 18, my friend and another officer went to his house to basically remind him that if he did anything after that, he would face real punishment as an adult and get 0 breaks. It was a last-ditch effort to be helpful. 2 days after his 18th birthday, he was caught committing an armed robbery. I'm pretty sure he's doing a few decades behind bars now. Story 10. I responded to a call where a woman claimed her husband hit her. When I asked her what happened, she told me he couldn't provide the kind of life she wanted. She stated that since he had a heart attack and developed lupus, he wasn't working, so she decided she could start inviting friends over to have intimacy with her for money. Now mind you, she is telling me, a fully uniformed officer, all of this. She said he should act as a person who handles the money for her. She then explained that she called someone to come over and told her husband that after she got paid for the intimacy, he should hold the man at knife point and take the rest of his money. She said he refused to help her with it, so they got into an argument. He pushed past her to get out of the apartment, and she claimed that was the cruelty for which she called the police. I asked her if she realized she had just admitted to planning something illegal. She seemed genuinely confused that her plan was a problem at all and didn't understand why I wasn't blaming her husband for refusing to be a part of it. Story 11. As a teacher, remember asking a student who was looking a bit out of it what was up. Sleepily, she replies, "Didn't get much sleep." I asked her if everything was fine, as you'd normally do. "Yeah, it's okay. My uncle got arrested last night, though. Low socioeconomic area, so it's not as unusual as you'd think." Anyway, she tells the story. "Uncle's so stupid. He and his mate thought it would be a good idea to steal a local ATM. He has his mate smash through the windows, put chains around it, and dragged it out their big truck. They decided it worked well, so they ended up dragging all the way home." She gives me a half smile. "Thing is, cops found them easy, just followed the marks on the road all the way to the front door. So, yeah, I feel worthy." Story 12. Ex-police officer here. I pulled over a man for having a brake light out. It was nothing serious. I ran his plates and the like. It all came back clean and nothing seemed off until he exclaimed, "I haven't had any alcohol," in an over-enthusiastic tone. For some reason, he thought this was a good idea. He nearly got away with it too. Vodka has a very faint scent. I breathalyzed him. The legal limit in England is 35 and he blew over 60. He was arrested on the spot and his vehicle was towed, idiot. Now to clarify, I did not mean that vodka is odorless. What I meant by that comment was that compared to beer, wine, or other spirits, vodka has a very mild smell. Most intoxicated drivers I pulled over either smelled of a much stronger alcohol or showed obvious physical signs of intoxication, making it easy to see they were impaired. Hope this clarifies it a bit. Story 13. A former U.S. Border Patrol agent here. This is a story from another agent I know up on the northern border. Local cops dropped a guy off at the Border Patrol station because he was a Canadian citizen and was caught supplying alcohol to a minor. My buddy ran his background and discovered he was a convicted child molester who had skipped out on his parole to another province. In Canada, you can sometimes evade your parole just by moving to another province because they won't always extradite you back to the province where you skipped out. My buddy thought about it for a minute and decided to have him deported through the POE, port of entry. That would put him right back into the province where his warrant was active. After a day, the guy started asking why he hadn't been deported yet. It was explained to him that he was going on the next Con Air flight to Buffalo, New York, so he could be processed and deported straight back into the arms of the authorities he was running from. Needless to say, he wasn't too thrilled when the U.S. Marshals came to pick him up and he realized he was really going back to prison. Story 14. I'm not a cop, but my kid was on a soccer team and I became friendly with another dad who was an officer. One day after practice, he was dying to tell us a story that had happened the previous week. He and his partner had visited an apartment complex where there had been several robberies. The owners asked the police to speak to the residents about security, and there were about 15 or 18 people in the meeting room. One middle-aged woman said in an intoxicated, slurred tone, "Well, if I see somebody outside my house, I'm going to give 'em my gun." One officer asked, "What kind of gun do you have?" She reached into her purse and pulled out a massive revolver. When asked where she got it, she replied, "My boyfriend gave it to me." The officer asked if she had ever fired it and she said no. He then asked which apartment she lived in. She said her building faced the grocery store. The lead cop said, "Ma'am, what's probably going to happen is, since you haven't shot before, you're going to fire, but you're going to miss. The gun is going to kick up, you're going to shoot high, and your bullet is going to go across the street into the Safeway parking lot and hit somebody putting groceries in their car." She was shocked and sat there with her mouth open. "I didn't know that a bullet could go that far." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "A bullet from your gun can probably go a mile." Another guy spoke up. "Yes, ma'am, and it will go through walls too." Everyone turned around to look at him. He continued, "A couple of years ago, I was trying to end it all, so I sat on the toilet, put a gun up, and fired. Just as I did, I moved my head down and missed, but the bullet went through the wall. It scared the crap out of the person next door taking a shower." Story 15. Ex-LEO here. I got a call a couple of years ago from a lady who said she was being threatened. I responded to a very rural area and she showed me her cell phone. It was a chainmail text from an unknown number. The message showed a picture of a girl with a gag in her mouth looking at the camera and holding a sign with both hands that said help. The text of the message stated she was in Amsterdam and that she didn't forward the text to 10 people. And look what happened to her. I explained to the lady that it was a hoax and explained what a chainmail message was. She refused to believe me and became argumentative. When I offered to contact Interpol for her, she did not know what that was. That wasn't good enough. And she just kept saying that the girl needed help. I asked her if she knew the girl, and she said no. She believed the girl had tried to send the message using any made-up number she could instead of contacting anyone she knew. My reasoning was once again shot down, and she said again that the girl needed her help. I remember driving away with the lady screaming at me that I needed to help that girl. I responded with a single no over my PA as I quickly sped away. Both of those women were never heard from again. Now, forward this to 10 people. Story 16. I'm not a cop, but I grew up around criminals, so I've had lots of interactions with them. My first stepfather was once arrested for selling stolen farm equipment like massive tractors and crap to an undercover officer. Several years later, he was again arrested for the exact same crime by the exact same officer, who was in disguise this time. Several years after that, he was once again arrested for nearly the same crime by the same officer, who was dressed as a woman. The only difference this time was that he was trying to sell stolen chain link fencing instead of tractors or whatever. Story 17. I'm not a cop, but a security guard at a large casino. A woman flags me down and tells me she left $3,000 in a machine and went to the bathroom. Someone took the ticket and cashed out. After some investigating, we found out that there were 3 guys involved, but one dude wearing a super obnoxious California flag shirt with a matching California flag hat kept all the money. We put out a bolo for the guy, hoping maybe we'd find him based on his face and physical descriptors. The next day, I clocked in and started walking around. I'm cruising through a slot section, and I'll be damned, this dude is sitting there in the exact same outfit with exactly $2,000 in his pocket and $1,000 in the machine. I couldn't believe it. I called for backup and detained the guy. The police came and arrested him. He was easily the dumbest criminal I've ever met. The dude was genuinely surprised that we found him. Story 18. Oh, God, too many. I can't remember like 90% of them. The list is endless. Here are the quick ones off the top of my head. A guy said he couldn't be speeding because he was too spiked. That ended in a DUI. A guy claimed he didn't have any grass in the car or on his person while I was looking at a baggie sticking out of his shoe. Arrested. A guy said he didn't have any substances on him while I was staring intently at his head where a large bag was sticking out of his hat. Arrested. A guy got shot at noon in a very public area over a deal. He was adamant about not pressing charges. We found a warrant later and he ended up in jail on several charges himself. I walked up in full uniform, not being sneaky, on a guy busting into cars at 10 a.m. with a crowbar. He tried to say the car was his, I guess hoping I didn't see the other 5 cars with broken windows. I was just trying to get coffee. He got tasered and obviously arrested. Some schmuck stole a fire truck while the crew was performing CPR in a Section 8 housing area. Same place, same guy, different time. They broke the windows and stole all the firefighters' phones and wallets. That one just made me angry, but we caught him thanks to a Find My Phone app and fingerprints that match both crimes. Less haha stupid and more I hate you as a person stupid. I've had many guys say those aren't my pants after finding substances. My reply, why are you wearing some other dude's pants? Usually shuts them down or makes them admit the pants are theirs, which is a great admission of guilt. Other officers were in a foot chase down the street and I followed the suspect in my squad car. I told him over the intercom that as soon as he wore out, I was getting out of the car and he wouldn't be able to outrun or fight me at that point. He was dumb because he didn't beeline into a backyard. He stayed on the road while I slow rolled behind him. A guy who broke into a house gave up because he thought we had a dog we were about to release. It was actually just my trainee barking loudly, more haha dumb. Story 19. Not a cop, but my dad's a lawyer and one of his clients, who was just out of jail at the time, was feeling a little hungry but had no money. Naturally, he went to the nearest deli and stole an entire roast chicken. Unfortunately for him, the deli was a favorite of the local police, and there were 2 officers right outside who immediately tried to arrest him. Not wanting to give up his prize, he kept running, frantically trying to eat as much of the chicken as he could before he got caught. There is multiple witnesses and camera footage of this man sprinting up the high street, clutching a whole chicken to his face. And if you're enjoying the video so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos just like this. Story 20. This one involves a guy in Prague who got spiked as heck, probably on something. I just arrested him, a colleague did the processing. He wanted to get into a house using only a tent peg. He was trying to dig through a door with it. When the family returned, they saw this idiot trying to make a hole in the door with the peg. He had probably been at it for a few hours considering how the door looked when we arrived. They called the police and the guy got up and ran like hell only to fall asleep in the middle of the road a few blocks away. Needless to say, we found him pretty fast. He was just sleeping there right in front of our car. We questioned him on what he was doing there and he just said, "Hey man, just taking a nap. Can't we take a nap around here anymore?" "Yeah, sure, buddy." So we brought him back to the family and they identified him instantly. "So just napping, were we? You are under arrest for attempted breaking and entering." While we were pushing him into the back of the car, he was still insisting that he must have been sleepwalking because he just wanted to take a nap. Do not do substances, kids. Story 21. I'm not a police officer, but I was the victim of a very dumb criminal. My wife and I were babysitting for some family friends. We had driven separate cars from work and met at their house. I was about to head home while my wife was staying the night with the kids when I heard a pickup truck squealing around a corner. It went up on a curb, hit a mailbox, drove onto the sidewalk around my wife's new car and headed down to the cul-de-sac, hitting more objects along the way. It came back around, hit my car on the opposite side of the street, bounced off of mine into my wife's car, sped up the street, took out a street sign, and just missed a fire hydrant. Then another car came ripping into the neighborhood and got T-boned by the pickup. The pickup drove through a yard and fled the neighborhood. I called the cops and went to check on the other car. It turned out the driver was an older chef from a local eatery who had been rear-ended by the pickup. After the initial hit, he had chased the guy down. The police showed up, took statements, and had the chef's car towed. We got a call an hour later, around 1 a.m., asking if the police could swing by. They came back to tell us they had found the guy's truck ditched on the green of a golf course with the engine blown. They found mail, including a mailbox in the back of the truck, adding mail theft to his crimes, but the best part, he had left his wallet and ID in the front seat. Apparently, the guy lived about 10 miles from where he wrecked, so he walked half a mile to a gas station and called the police to file a report for a stolen vehicle. The police told him to hang tight and said they would bring him to the station to take the report. They picked the intoxicated up, took him to the station, and had him sign the stolen vehicle report. Then they turned around and arrested him. Story 22. Not a cop, but a civilian digital forensic analyst. I found evidence of CP on digital media. I informed my supervisor and wrote an initial findings report detailing that the person who used the computer had downloaded the files themselves and that the material was not placed there via any other medium. My supervisor, a police officer, usually a detective depending on who was running the case, took the suspect in for questioning. He produced several images that had been found plus a file list showing the number of images, where and how they were found, and their grade of severity. The suspect then said, "Yes, I know it's there, but I don't know how my CP got on my computer." This brings truth to our saying, sometimes we only catch the idiots. Story 23. Not a cop, but I have a story worth telling here. My cousin got into substances fairly young and was also committing crimes to support this habit, as they do. We have a TV show called Crime Watch where they ask people to identify criminals. The family was watching one day when he appeared on the screen. He had broken into a car and stolen a checkbook back when those were a thing. He forged a check and went into a bank to cash it. Normally, I'm sure this would have worked, but the teller refused to cash it. When he asked why, she replied, "Because that's my checkbook," at which point he ran. It seems he was so stupid that he had stolen it from a car parked in the staff parking lot of the same bank he tried to cash it in. Of course, being a rather large family and him being well known for his idiocy, everyone saw him on Crime Watch and called in to identify him. Do not do substances, kids. Story 24. I'm not a cop, but at my last job as a manager, I got an intoxicated lady arrested when she came through my drive-thru twice. We used to have a second drive-thru lane until an intoxicated driver smashed it, and one of my crew members noticed a car was just chilling there. A few minutes later, one of my crew grabs me and says this lady is at the window and isn't talking to them. I headed to the drive-thru window to see this lady yelling at someone, and I tried to get her attention. She just mumbled, grabbed a bottle out of a liquor store bag and put it on her seat. Then she drove away before I could get her plate number. 2 hours later, I was on the phone with another manager and my crew grabbed me again, saying the lady was back. This time, she was actually talking, mumbling about an order that didn't match anything on the screen. I told her to park in the designated spot for large orders. She just nodded and headed there without paying. Until then, I wasn't entirely sure if she was intoxicated or mentally ill, so I called the cops. Just as a cruiser pulled in, she drove out of the spot and back around to the drive-thru again. I pointed her car out to the officer. He pulled her over right at the window and she stumbled out. It turns out the person I thought she was yelling at earlier was actually her little dog, a cute little pug. We wound up with 2 cop cars, a tow truck, and animal control on site to take care of the situation. I felt so bad for that poor little dog. Story 25. Ex-cop here. There was a kid in my area, 14 or so, who was a complete idiot. He was a thief and a terrible one at that. He knew I would be in a particular shop at the same time every day, sitting in the security office with the manager because of shoplifting issues. He knew this because I'd already caught him about 4 times. On this occasion, he had actually seen me walking in, and he still filled his pockets with sweets and walked out. I followed him out to find him with his dad. I just smiled and his dad rolled his eyes immediately and cuffed him around the back of the head. I gave him more chances than I should have, partly because of his age and partly because his family was dirt poor and couldn't afford fines or the cost of getting him to community service. But that one was the final straw, unfortunately. I've been gone a few years now, so hopefully he has finally developed a brain cell or two. Story 26. I'm writing this on mobile, so please excuse any mistakes. I'm not a cop, but I live in a small town in Alaska and have a funny story. Only about 500 people live in our town and pretty much everyone has the same accent. Enter Gino, a foreign transfer student who arrived back in the 70s. He had a strong French-Canadian accent, and we only have one store here called the AC, and he decided to rob it with a couple of other guys. They eventually realized it was a bad idea and left, leaving just him to finish the job. It has since become a local joke because he said, and I quote my grandma, who was the cashier at the time, "Put the money in the bag," in a heavy accent. He was wearing a ski mask, but my grandma immediately said, "Get the hell out of here, Gino." He was so scared that he just ran off. He was obviously caught and charged with armed robbery, and today he actually runs his own sketchy store. Story 27. Late to the party, but here is one of my favorites. A guy got kicked out of a bar after hours club by security. He claimed he'd be back, and about 30 minutes later, he came around the corner shooting at the guards. They dogpiled him and cuffed him. My partners and I were only a block away. We got there and tossed him in the back seat. The dude never left the frame on the security cameras from the time he started shooting until I put him in my car, and he still tried to claim it wasn't him. Same club, different idiot. This one tried to get past security without a pat-down because he had a gun on him. Security hit him with mace and he pulled his gun out and started waving it around. I was driving past just as the call was coming out and pulled up on him as he was ditching the weapon in a dumpster. I took him into custody and he claimed it wasn't his gun, not unusual there. He told me that his martial arts skills kicked in when he was attacked by security and that he had disarmed one of them. I know all the security guards there and which ones are armed, only one. I found her and could see her weapon was still secured in her holster. It didn't help his case that this was not the first time this fool had tried to ditch a gun on me. Story 28. I'm not a cop, I work for a New York-style pizza shop, but hear me out. We make 12-inch and 18-inch pies for delivery that go in boxes, and then we make slice pies to sell pizza by the slice. Slice pies are usually somewhere around 25 inches, so the slices are massive. DoorDash calls in an order for a pizza, except the customer wants one slice of the pizza to be different from the rest. Okay, it's a pain in the butt, but we'll do it. The DoorDash guy comes to pick it up, spiked as hell, and while he's there, he orders a slice for himself. On the way to his delivery, he eats the one special slice in the box and attempts to replace it with the giant slice of cheese pizza he got for himself. The customer later sent us a picture of a giant slice of pizza wedged into the missing space in the box. This is exactly the kind of psychotic behavior reefer madness tried to warn us about. If only we had listened. Story 29. Super late to the game, but I've had a few stupid criminals in my time. First off, we had a call regarding an ongoing domestic dispute. The suspect was armed with a knife and was shouting at neighbors through the window about how he was going to end his wife. Upon our arrival, he claimed that it was self-defense. His reasoning? She had slept with another man, so he had to self-defend his honor by ending her. I reminded him that anything he said could be used against him, but he proceeded to explain how the relationship had gone downhill since he started manufacturing and selling substances. My curiosity was piqued, of course, so I returned to the house with a warrant. It turned out he was running the city's largest ever discovered substance operation. Idiot. The second guy denied his own identity all the way to court. We showed up with an arrest warrant and, unsurprisingly, given his stupidity, he was at home with the door unlocked watching SpongeBob SquarePants. He denied he was a suspect even as I held a photo up right beside his face. And we're talking about someone with a very distinctive look, long black hair, and Johnny Depp-style facial hair, but weighing 300 pounds. I guess it's possible he had a lookalike who just happened to be in his house, but fingerprints don't lie. Even in custody, after his fingerprints came back as a perfect match, he still claimed it wasn't him. The funny thing was, the judge gave him more time for the obstruction than for the original offense. Story 30. I'm not a cop, but I have a story about a stupid criminal. It was a hot summer evening and someone broke into a house across the street. I don't know exactly what he took, but I think it was a small TV or something similar. Unfortunately for him, his mode of transportation was as Dutch as it could get, a bicycle. Unfortunately for him, the warm weather made him take off his jacket and hang it over his bike. Unfortunately for him, he left the bike right in front of the house he robbed, probably because he realized he couldn't carry a TV while cycling. Unfortunately for him, he forgot his wallet, including his ID, in the jacket on his bike. When the police arrived, it was very obvious who had committed the burglary. They let out a sigh. Oh, Barry, not you again. It turns out this had happened before in exactly the same way. Story 31. I'm not a cop, but I used to work for the unemployment office. In my country, you receive benefits as long as you are actively looking for work, attending control interviews, and remain a registered job seeker. One man showed up because his payments had been suspended for the month. He hadn't shown up for his interview and hadn't answered any of the letters sent to him. Oh, I couldn't have known about the interview, he claimed. I just came back from a 6-month holiday abroad, so I didn't check my mail. I do that every year, so I didn't expect to receive a letter this time. By trying to avoid losing 1 month of pay, he ended up having to reimburse the office for the full 6 months he was away. He also had to prove he had been in the country nonstop for the last 5 years, which he hadn't, and was hit with a pretty hefty fine. Story 32. I'm not a cop, but I had the privilege of witnessing this. I was the duty manager of a food store at the time when a guy who looked like he was struggling with fixation walked in, picked up a basket, and proceeded to fill it with 5-pound blocks of cheese. I saw this and stood by the exit waiting for him to try to leave just as a police officer walked into the store. I pointed out the shoplifter and the officer started a conversation with the guy. He asked for his name and then asked if he was making a large mac and cheese for the family. The guy looked like he was about to pass out and tried to abandon the basket and leave. But the officer said, No, James, you've got a family to feed with that macaroni and cheese. He then put his arm around the guy, took him to the checkout, and made him pay 50 pounds worth of cheese. The guy came back 20 minutes later trying to return it all, but he got laughed out of the store. Story 33. My car was hit in the parking lot of my old apartment complex by a rental scooter. The suspect hit the front passenger corner going full speed, crushed that whole side of my car in, flew across my hood, and knocked the bumper off the car next to me. He picked up his scooter and drove away. However, stuck in the wheel well of my car were the front headlight and fender cover of the scooter. On the cover was a large sticker with the name of the rental company, its location, and the scooter number, all right there. The cops arrived, found that he lived in the apartment complex next door, and promptly arrested him. It turned out he was badly cut and bruised with his clothes ripped when the police got there. We went to court 3 times because he kept finding new evidence to prove his innocence. One piece of evidence he brought was his email receipt, which showed Scooter 396 registered to him, the exact number of the scooter that hit me. He kept telling the judge it was Scooter 369 even after the judge looked at the receipt and told him he was wrong. Finally, the judge gave him an ultimatum: plead guilty and pay my deductible and other insurance fees, or refuse, still pay the fees and spend 60 days in jail. He promptly replied, I'm innocent. I never did get my deductible after all that. Story 34. I was paying for a young family's groceries because they came up a few euros short, and I didn't like the idea of them having to put back diapers. I bought the groceries for them and they were very happy. They even invited me to eat with them someday and told me where they lived. I offered to help them bring some of the groceries home, but not everything since I only had my bike. Fast forward 2 weeks, I heard really loud noises in my backyard where my bike was parked at around 2 a.m. I live in a super quiet suburban neighborhood, so I definitely wasn't the only one who heard it. I went out to see what was happening, and standing there with a screwdriver over my bike was the father of that same young family. He didn't even run away. He just said, "Oh, it's yours? I knew it looked familiar. Good night." He then hopped over my fence and left, leaving my bike with a lot of scratch marks around the keyhole. Story 35. Obligatory, not a cop, but post. I had my car broken into on a Tuesday afternoon at about noon on a busy street and no one saw a thing. I ought to reiterate it. It was a busy street. Anyway, I came out of a coffee date to find my window smashed and my overnight bag missing. It must have looked like a very large purse. It contained my iPad, a Harry Potter book, a pair of garments, and deodorant. I called the police and they said they'd asked for security camera footage from one of the businesses on Monday, as it was already the weekend. My friend, however, insisted we look around since the cop didn't. Lo and behold, she was right. We found a trail of items, starting with the deodorant leading straight to the guy's apartment door. Apparently, he had also robbed a few construction workers later that day, stealing a bunch of tools out of their trucks. They caught him red-handed. I never got my iPad back. The police think he had already sold or hidden it by the time he was arrested. Story 36. Not a cop anymore, but my first traffic stop was a double DUI. I pulled over a small car for swerving and driving with no lights at around 2 a.m. The car pulled into an abandoned gas station parking lot. I ran the tags and started talking to the driver, a middle-aged man. It was immediately apparent that he was hammered. About 30 seconds into this, a little pickup truck pulled into the lot, parked about 40 yards away from us, and cut the engine. I asked the guy if he knew the person in the truck. "Yes, sir, I do. That's so-and-so. I met her at the bar tonight." My response was, "Cool, can she drive you home?" He looked at me like I was the biggest dummy ever. He said, "Heck no, man, I'm driving her car because she's too intoxicated to drive it, and she's driving my truck because I'm too intoxicated to drive it. I don't think either one of us should drive the other." Maybe those weren't his exact words, but it was close enough. Lots of other funny things were said that night between those two, but that was the highlight for me. Story 37. I'm not a cop, but a paramedic. We got called at about 4 p.m. for an unresponsive guy in a car parked in a lot. The police arrived as well. The guy was passed out, intoxicated in the front passenger seat of his car with the keys in the ignition. We woke him up and the cops talked to him for a while. He wouldn't admit to driving. He claimed he was with his girlfriend for his birthday, and she had just left him there. It was a bit of a gray area. He was intoxicated and the keys were in the ignition, but since he wasn't in the driver's seat, they couldn't easily charge him with a DUI. The officer asked us to check him out to see if we could take him to the hospital to sober up. We evaluated him but didn't find any medical necessity to mandate an ER visit. He was intoxicated but still legally competent to make his own medical decisions. The officer asked him to sit in the back of the cruiser for a minute so we could talk. The cop explained he didn't have enough to arrest him for a DUI, so he was planning on just driving the guy home. Suddenly, the guy started bashing his head and kicking his feet against the cruiser window. He managed to partially pop the window out. He went from getting a free ride home to facing a felony for damaging police property. Story 38. I worked at a clothing retailer. A dude came in, bought something, returned it, and then tried to rob me. I had already called security and pulled my knife on the guy. He ran away, attacked 2 security guards, and fled. But to process the return, I had needed his name and address since he paid in cash. He gave them to me, full name, full address. I then turned that information over to the state police. The second best was a husband and wife who ran into another store, grabbed a bunch of items, ran out, and got into a bright green 1980s Dodge Charger with a bad muffler. On both occasions, they were found rather quickly. And if any of these stories got to YouTube, here's more for you. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. I'll catch you in that video.